Usually when you watch a professional magician perform, there is this expectation of absolute seamless perfection.
Right. You expect the illusion to just go off without a hitch.
Exactly. You are watching their hands, you are waiting for the prestige, and you expect this flawless trick. But imagine if, right in the middle of their biggest set, the magician just accidentally drops all their cards on the floor.
Oh man, just a total disaster.
Complete disaster. The illusion is totally shattered. But instead of panicking, the magician just kicks the cards up into the air, grabs one, and boom, it is your card.
Yeah, they turn a massive fumble into a massive ta-da moment.
Yes, and that is exactly what Paramount Studios just did with the Avatar franchise.
It really is. I mean, it is the absolute definition of a corporate magic trick salvaged from what was, honestly, a catastrophic leak.
The cards were literally on the floor, and they just decided to play the hand they dropped. A fully finished, highly anticipated animated movie leaked years ahead of schedule, and instead of, sending out an army of lawyers with cease and desist orders, Paramount weaponized the leak.
Which is completely antithetical to how modern intellectual property is usually managed.
Oh, totally.
In the era of Disney and Marvel, a leak of that magnitude usually results in a complete lockdown. Legal teams get involved, PR goes entirely silent, and release schedules are often, delayed or completely retooled.
Just to let the heat die down, right?
Exactly. They want to regain control of the narrative. But Paramount looked at the landscape and pivoted in the exact opposite direction.
And that is exactly what we are dissecting today. If you were joining us for this deep dive, we want to cut through all the internet rumors and get straight to the facts. We have this massive, incredibly confusing dump of recent Avatar Studios news that has completely taken over the fandom.
It has been a wild couple of weeks.
It's insane. So we are looking at two highly detailed video analyses today that break down both these leaks and the official announcements that followed. Plus, we have this piece of incredibly sharp, translated fan commentary that points out a major fundamental contradiction in the lore they are building.
The sheer volume of information to synthesize is staggering, especially considering this is a franchise that has been existing in a virtual content desert since, 2021?
Yeah, easily. For years, fans had essentially nothing but a static website and, vague promises.
And now, suddenly, the floodgates are open.
Right. So let's start with the inciting incident here, which is the Aang movie. According to the deep dive into the production pipeline, this film features an adult Aang, around 25 years old.
Which fans have wanted
forever. And it was originally slated for a theatrical release way out in October 2026, but then a fully finished version of the movie leaked.
And we really need to emphasize this. We aren't talking about a rough animatic or storyboards or some script treatment.
No, the finished, polished product leaked before even a teaser trailer had officially seen the light of day.
The mechanical reality of a leak like that is just mind-boggling. Modern animation pipelines are so heavily secured. You have digital rights management software, watermark render files, compartmentalized vendor access.
So for a finished cut to make it out into the wild,
it implies a colossal, either internally or at some localized.
But the reaction is the truly fascinating part.
Yeah.
Because of the absolute insanity of the situation, Paramount actually moved the release date up. They pushed it to July 25th, 2026, and shifted it directly to streaming on Paramount+.
Yeah, and the official trailer is now officially out, and it is pulling just astronomical numbers.
Huge numbers. And the setting is officially confirmed to be this in-between era. It bridges the gap between the end of the 100-Year War from the original series and the industrialized formation of Republic City that we see later in The Legend of Korra.
It is a really critical era to explore historically. I mean, you are watching a post-war society attempt to build a globalized utopia, which is inherently messy.
Right, but I want to look at the business calculus here for a second, because rushing a release date to beat a leak, is that genuinely a sign of supreme confidence in the final product?
Right.
Or is it like a desperate reactive move to salvage subscriber retention on a streaming platform?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because Paramount Plus is kind of fighting for its life in the streaming wars, right?
It is a fascinating intersection of both desperation and opportunity. Paramount isn't just releasing a movie. They are, as you said earlier, weaponizing.
Right.
In modern streaming economics, a leak isn't necessarily just a loss of revenue. It can actually function as aggressive free market. When that footage leaked, Paramount's analytics teams would have immediately started tracking the viral engagement.
They didn't see people mocked.
Exactly. They didn't see backlash. They saw a fandom violently react.
They basically saw the hype train leave the station without them, and they had to sprint to catch up.
That is exactly. They saw the astronomical viral engagement and realized the fandom was rabid for it. So they moved the release date to capture the monetization of that viral wave before it crested.
Which makes sense.
But furthermore, the source material points out a massive external pressure. The next Spider-Man movie comes out literally 2 days after this new July 25th.
Oh, wow. Wait, really? So they're sandwiching themselves right up against a cultural behemoth.
Yes. The competition for the attention economy is at an all-time high. That specific. Capturing those eyeballs quickly before the leaked footage entirely dilutes the novelty of the official release and before Spider-Man just dominates the cultural conversation is a desperate necessity.
So it is a bit of a panic move, but an intelligent.
But the confidence aspect comes from the creators themselves.
Right. I was reading through that Entertainment Weekly interview with the original creators, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, and they explicitly confirmed that for this specific movie, they finally had the time, the budget, and the resources they had always begged for in their previous projects.
Yeah, they were very vocal about that.
They aren't trying to hide a flawed, rushed product. They're trying to protect a masterpiece that they are deeply proud of.
And the proof of that pride is embedded in the actual mechanics of how the film looks. The EW interview reveals a significant behind-the-scenes battle over the animation style. There was early studio pressure to make this new movie CG.
Which makes total sense from a corporate perspective, honestly. You look at the massive industry-shifting success of things like the Spider-Verse or Arcane.
Or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, Mutant Mayhem. Stylized 3D is what sells right now. It is the current language of blockbuster animation.
It absolutely is. And beyond the aesthetic trend, it is often fundamentally cheaper and faster in the long run.
Oh, because of the assets.
Right. Once you build a 3D character rig and light a 3D environment, you can reuse those assets infinitely. You can change camera angles mathematically.
Whereas 2D is just grueling.
Exactly. 2D hand-drawn animation requires every single frame, every shifting perspective, painstakingly illustrated by human. It is a grueling pipe.
But DiMartino and Konietzko aggressively pushed back against the CGI mandate. They insisted on keeping it hand-drawn. They explicitly called hand-drawn animation the quote-unquote soul of the franchise.
That is a monumental artistic and financial take in 2020. By insisting on hand-drawn animation, they are actively rejecting the current industry stand to signal a return to form.
And Brian Konietzko specifically mentioned in the interview that Avatar has always been a love letter to Japanese anime.
Right, he was very clear about this.
The sources specifically noted that there are shots in the new trailer, like there is this very specific sweeping shot of Katara that looks straight out of a Makoto Shinkai film, like Your Name or Suzume.
Which is essentially the gold standard for modern 2D animation.
Completely. When we talk about that Makoto Shinkai aesthetic, we are talking about breathtaking, meticulously detailed, hyper-realistic background. Lush clouds, blinding lens flares, incredibly deep lighting, paired with traditional 2D character cells.
It creates this overwhelming sense of scale and emotion.
If that is what they are achieving, it is gorgeous damage control.
It is, but it also serves a deeply psychological purpose for the fandom. You have an audience that has felt somewhat alienated by recent live-action adaptations, which fundamentally look and feel different than the original.
Yeah, the vibes are just totally different.
And they have dealt with the sheer corporate silence from Avatar Studios for years. So bringing back the hand-drawn soul of the franchise is a calculated, brilliant way to tell the core audience, we remember exactly what you loved about this world, and we are preserving the mechanics of how...
So they have this beautiful hand-drawn anchor, but a release date is just a date on a calendar, What really blew my mind reading through these breakdowns is how Paramount is structuring the actual week of July 25th.
It is so aggressive.
It is.
Yes.
We aren't just looking at a movie drop. We are looking at a masterclass in algorithmic manipulation and franchise reactivation.
The sequencing of their synergy strategy is incredibly precise.
Okay, let's break down the timeline mass here because it is staggering. On July 23rd, the highly anticipated Avatar fighting game finally releases.
Right.
On July 24th, they are hosting a special, exclusive early screening of the Aang movie in Ballroom 20 at San Diego Comic-Con. And then, on July 25th, the official worldwide streaming release of the movie hits Paramount Plus.
3 days.
3 days. 3 massive, interconnected cultural drops.
If we look at the mechanics of how the attention economy functions, this is a textbook example of forcing an inescapable ecosystem. They are targeting 3 different psychological triggers in a 72-hour window.
Walk me through that. How does dropping a game, a screening, and a stream fundamentally differ from just doing a massive regular marketing campaign?
Well, a standard marketing campaign asks for passive attention. You see a billboard, you watch a trailer on YouTube, but this strategy demands active, varied engagement.
Okay, so starting with the game.
Right. On July 23rd, the video game dropped. Fighting games require physical muscle memory. You are literally tactilely engaging with the characters, learning their movesets, and internalizing the lore through gameplay. It builds a mechanical connection to the IP.
You are literally stepping into Aang's shoes, throwing the punches.
Exactly. Then the very next day, on July 24th, the Ballroom 20 screening creates artificial scarcity and FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Because only a few thousand people get to see it.
Yeah. You have thousands of hardcore fans seeing it early. They immediately flood Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit with reactions. They game the algorithms by dominating trending topics.
So by the time July 25th rolls around, the casual fan who maybe hadn't thought about Avatar in years is suddenly seeing it everywhere. It feels like this massive global event that they are missing out on.
Precise. And then the barrier to entry is removed. On the 25th, it is globally available on stream. The tactile engagement from the game feeds into the algorithmic hype of the screen, which funnels directly into streaming numbers. It is a closed loop of attention.
But they don't even stop there.
Yeah.
The convention presence itself is unprecedented. For the SDCC panel, Avatar Studios secured Hall H.
Which is massive.
For anyone who doesn't track convention logistics, Hall H is the absolute holy grail of nerd culture. It is a massive, cavernous 6,500-seat venue. Historically, that room is strictly reserved for the Titans, like Marvel announcing their next 10 years of movies, DC, Star Wars.
And Avatar has an entire 1-hour panel in that room.
Yeah, and the description says it features the voice actors, the creative team discussing the making of the film, and this is the linchpin quote, what is next in the Avatarverse?
The signaling there is crucial. By taking Hall H, Paramount is communicating to both the fandom and to Walt that Avatar is no longer just a nostalgic Nickelodeon cartoon. It is a tentpole, multi-tiered cinematic universe.
But I have to push back on this aggressive timeline. I'm looking at this sequence, and it feels like Paramount is trying to serve a 5-course meal in 10 minutes. Are they risking oversaturating a fan base that has essentially been starving in a content desert for years?
That is a very real risk, often referred to as franchise.
Because since 2021, fans have had 0 new animated lore. Now, in 3 days, they are getting a game, a movie, and huge announcements about the future. If you starve someone and then force feed them, they get sick. Do you think people might just get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of canon dropping all at once?
We have seen it happen with other major cinematic universes where the barrier to entry, the amount of homework the audience has to do to understand the new project, becomes too high.
Like having to watch 6 shows to understand 1 movie.
Exactly. However, in this specific case, because the content drought has been so severe, the initial hunger will likely override the fatigue for that.
So the weekend is safe, but what about the long term?
The danger lies in that Hall H panel. When they announce what is next, the future slate cannot feel like a homework. If it feels disjointed, overly complex, or rushed, the saturation will backfire and the fans will reject.
Well, we just described a universe that might be collapsing under the weight of its own complex lore, which transitions us perfectly into exactly what they're going to announce in Hall H, because that vacated October 2026 theatrical release slot, the one the Aang movie had before the leak forced them to move it up, is sitting wide open.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. And the video breakdowns of these leaks point directly to the project poised to take it over. We need to talk about the Seven Havens.
This is where the world building takes a structural, fundamental leap that could either redefine the franchise or break it entirely.
The rumors strongly suggest that a teaser trailer for a project called The Seven Havens is going to drop at the very end of that Hall H panel. Word is that this series has either already wrapped production or is extremely close to wrapping, meaning they have polished footage to show. But the premise is what completely short-circuited my brain.
It alters the foundational mythology we've understood for 2 decades.
Right. It introduces twin avatars, a duo named Parvi and Nisha. And they aren't just identical twins who happen to share the bending power. One represents the light side, housing the spirit of Rava. The other represents the dark side, housing the spirit of Vatu.
It effectively creates 2 opposing avatar cycles running in complete opposite elemental orders at the exact same time.
Which is
the audacity of this narrative choice cannot be overstated. Let's look at the cosmology of this. The avatar has always been a singular stabilizing force. The spirit of Rava, the spirit of peace, light, and order, bonded with a human soul to maintain balance across.
While Vatu is the spirit of darkness and chaos.
Yes. During the legend of Korra, we saw Vatu temporarily bond with someone to create a dark avatar, but it was framed as a catastrophic aberration, an apocalyptic event.
It was basically treated like a spiritual nuclear bomb going off.
Exactly. But to integrate both spirits into twin protagonists, to make them a permanent structural part of the world.
We even have a physical leak supporting this. A character designer who was prepping prints to sell at San Diego Comic-Con accidentally posted an image of one of these twins online. The art is labeled Avatar Pavey, spelled slightly differently in the P-A-V-E-Y, and is described by the artist as an absolute...
Which is a brilliant, unsettling juxtaposition.
How so?
Well, if you have a character designated as the Dark Avatar, literally carrying the primordial essence of chaos and destruction within their soul, but their human personality is meaning, you create an incredible internal conflict.
I see.
They are biologically wired for apocalypse, but psychologically wired for...
That is fat. But let's look at the external conflict, because that is where the physics of this universe start to break down. I'm trying to visualize how this actually functions. If I think about a sound wave, right?
Okay, sure.
If you play a frequency and then you introduce a second sound wave that is the exact inverse of the first one, they don't harmonize. They experience destructive interference. They cancel each other out, creating dead silence.
That is a perfect mechanical analogy.
Right. So if you have an avatar of light and an avatar of darkness operating at the exact same time, they don't just fight. They risk conceptually canceling out the very purpose of the avatar. If the avatar's job is to maintain balance, but one is intrinsically pulling toward order and the other toward chaos, they leave the world in a spiritual vacuum. What does that mean politically for the four nations?
The geopolitical ramifications would be devastating. Historically, the four nations looked to the singular avatar for dispute resolution. If you have two demigods whose natures are diametrically opposed, you inevitably create religious and political schisms.
It is essentially a Cold War scenario.
Exactly. Does the Earth Kingdom ally with the Light Avatar while the Fire Nation aligns with the Dark Avatar? You are introducing a permanent theological arms race into a world that is already prone.
And this is where my concern lies. Does introducing a literal dark avatar as a permanent fixture risk turning what has historically been a very nuanced, complex world into a cheap binary superhero story?
That is the worry among the fandom.
Think about the original series. The villains weren't just evil for the sake of being evil. The Fire Nation were aggressors, yes. But we spent entire seasons learning how their citizens were indoctrinated by centuries of propaganda. Their motivations were rooted in a twisted sense of sharing their prosperity. If Rava and Vatu are reduced to just red lasers versus blue lasers, good versus evil, it flattens the narrative.
It absolutely risks flattening the narrative into a Marvel-esque superhero trope, which is not what this franchise was built on. However, if the writers approach this with maturity, they could explore something profound.
Like what?
In Eastern philosophy, which heavily inspire the show, light and dark are not good and evil. They are yin and yang. Both are necessary.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, if they lean into that, they could explore the idea that too much light actually burns and stagnates, while chaos and darkness are necessary for rebirth and change.
Precisely.
If the sweethearted dark avatar is actually the one pushing society to evolve, while the light avatar becomes an oppressive, authoritarian enforcer of the status quo, that would be the most mature philosophical exploration the franchise has ever attempted.
It would fundamentally challenge the audience's understanding of balance.
But building a narrative that heavy and dense is exhausting. You can't sustain that level of apocalyptic, world-shattering storytelling forever without breaking the writers or the audience, which explains the most bizarre leak we have to cover today.
This one really threw everyone off.
It really looks like a desperate attempt by the creators to just, I don't know, have fun again. Let's talk about the mystery project, Red Thunder.
This is a fascinating look at how creators actively manage their own creative stamina and avoid burnout.
So back in that same EW interview, Brian Konietzko mentioned that the Aang movie was just part of a larger slate. He specifically cheesed, quote, "I am working on another thing, which we will announce when the time is right."
Normally that is standard PR deflection.
Right. But a media outlet called Night's Edge Media got their hands on a leaked casting call for a Nickelodeon animation project. The working title is Red Thunder. And according to the leak, voice recording for a 22-minute pilot already began back in August in Burbank, California. This isn't a concept pit. Actors were in booths recording dialogue.
The specificity of that leak, the location, the timeline, the format confirms this is moving rapidly through the pipeline. But the details of the casting call itself are what indicate a massive structural and tonal pivot for the universe.
The character descriptions are wild. They are casting two native North American teenage males, which in the coding of this universe translates to the Water Tribe. The first character is named Boo.
B-U, right?
Yes, Boo. He is described as an impulsive, spacey apprentice spellsmith with skate rocker energy. The casting call notes he's the kind of guy who picks unwinnable fights, as long as it is for the right reason.
It is a high-energy, chaotic archetype, very reminiscent of early Aang, but infused with a modern, almost punk rock aesthetic. But the term spellsmith is the mechanical there.
Right. Let's pause on spellsmith. What does that even mean in the context of Avatar? Bending has always been portrayed as a hard magic system based on martial arts.
It is entirely physical.
It is tied to breath, to chi, to physical movement.
Yeah.
Spells imply incantations, potions, or externalized magic. Introducing a spellsmith into a bending world is a massive mechanical shift.
It suggests an evolution, or perhaps a degradation, of how humans interact with spiritual. And perhaps in this era, traditional bending has been supplemented by something more academic or ritualistic.
Or maybe they're just trying to break the rules to keep things fresh. Because his counterpart, Neeb, breaks the rules even further. Neebs is described as the total opposite of Boo. He is a lazy genius who is being groomed to become chancellor, and he absolutely hates the politics involved.
Classic reluctant leader.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. The casting call specifically notes that the actor playing Neebs must be able to sing.
Which is entirely unprecedented for a mainline protagonist in this franchise. We've had brief comedic musical moments like Iroh singing, but casting specifically for vocal performance implies music is structural to the show.
The context for why this shift is happening is vital. In the EW interview, the creators openly admitted that writing prequels and sequels is incredibly grueling. They stated that the Aang movie, which has to blend the canon of the original show with the established future of Korra, was the hardest thing they have ever attempted in their series.
It is a massive continuity.
So Red Thunder is described as a clean, standalone slate. It is a scrappy, low-stakes, comedic tone, heavily leaning into the goofy episodic mode.
The mechanics of creator burnout are very real here. The burden of legacy is crushing. When you write the adult Aang movie, you are dealing with decades of established lore, fan expectations, and complex geopolitics.
And then Seven Havens on top of that.
Right. You move into Seven Havens, dealing with the literal spiritual dichotomy of the universe. It is heavy, dense, apocalyptic material. Shifting to a low-stakes, 22-minute episodic comedy format is a necessary shock to their own system.
Yes, but if it is a shock to the creator system, it might be a shock to the fan system as well. I mean, Boo sounds like pure chaos walking on two legs, and Neebs is your classic reluctant sidekick. It sounds incredibly fun, but I have to push back on this idea of a clean slate. Can you truly have a clean slate in a universe where the core engine, the Avatar, literally reincarnates and connects every single era together on a linear timeline? No matter when or where you set a story, fans are going to immediately act as archivists, trying to slot it into the historical canon.
That is the inescapable paradox of a shared cinematic universe. You can attempt to create a self-contained narrative bubble, but the audience is trained to look for the connective. And in this specific case, the setting of Red Thunder introduces a massive, glaring complication for anyone trying to build that.
Which brings us to the single biggest red flag in all of these, the cycle connect. We need to look at how the fundamental laws of this universe might be collapsing, thanks to a brilliant piece of translation and commentary from one of the international fandoms.
This is where the hyperfixation of a dedicated fan base catches the structural flaws the studio might be trying to gloss over.
Exactly. So we have a translated source, originally written in Hebrew, by a highly observant fan on a forum that points out a massive issue with everything we just discussed regarding Red Thunder. The foundational rule of the entire Avatar franchise is the reincarnation cycle.
Earth, fire, air, water.
The order strictly dictates the elements over and over as an immutable law of nature. Following the events of the legend of Korra, and Korra was a water avatar, the very next avatar must be an earthbender. So this fan asks a very simple question.
Why is there a brand new Water Tribe series?
Right. Why is there a brand new Water Tribe-based series, Red Thunder, coming out so soon after Korra?
It is an incredibly valid point of structure. If we try to reconcile this based strictly on the mechanics of the universe, we have to forensically examine the timeline clues provided.
Okay, let's do it.
The casting call for Red Thunder mentions that Neebs is being groomed Chancellor.
Right, and Chancellor implies a very specific level of societal evolution.
Exactly. Let's break down the geopolitical history of the Water Tribe. Historically, within the deep canon, the northern and southern water tribes were led by chiefs. They were tribal, deeply spiritual, and largely agrarian or hunter-gatherer society.
Very.
The shift from a tribal chief to a Western-style chancellor suggests a massive society. It implies bureaucracy, parliament, perhaps industrialization, and a separation of state power.
So a chancellor implies a society that has developed far into the future, likely well past Korra's. But if it is in the far future and it centers on a water avatar, it completely breaks the elemental cycle. We skipped earth and fire.
Yes. So the alternative is that it is set in the past.
The Hebrew forum post actually explores this. They mentioned that they could understand a water tribe focus if the series was a prequel about Avatar Kuruk. Kuruk was the water avatar before Kyoshi, hundreds of years in the past.
But that is where the timeline math fails again. The title Chancellor simply doesn't fit the historical setting of Kuruk's era. During Kuruk's time, the water tribes were deeply traditional and isolated. A bureaucratic chancellor would be entirely anachronistic.
So the internal timeline is a total mess. But what is even crazier is that the studio's actual production timeline is also a mess. According to the deep dive on the leaks, there was an old, heavily rumored plan at Paramount for 3 animated movies. an Aang movie, a Kyoshi movie, and an Zuko or Korra movie. That slate is completely dead.
The internal turmoil and restructuring at Avatar Studios over the last few years has clearly forced them to abandon their initial roadmap.
The new expected slate, according to the current data, is totally different. We have the Aang movie, which we know is actively in the pipe. Then, potentially a project centered on Avatar Yang. The breakdowns note this is likely a strategic move to capitalize on massive current debates in the book fandom.
The Yang 10 novels introduced a fascinating moral complexity to her character that fans are obsessed with
Right. I need to unpack this for a second because it is wild. In the original show, Yangshin was revered as this perfect, holy air nomad. But the recent novels reveal that she engaged in incredibly ruthless, borderline sociopathic espionage and political manipulation to keep the peace.
She was basically a spy.
She essentially operated like a black ops agent, which starkly contrasts with Aang's strict pacifism. Capitalizing on that debate is super smart. But then the third project on the slate is this new water series, Red Thunder.
Which forces us back to the fans' valid. How does a water series mechanically fit? If we look exclusively at the data provided by the casting call, we have to propose radical. First, perhaps Red Thunder isn't about an avatar at all.
Wait, an Avatar show without an avatar?
It is possible. It might simply follow two regular Water Tribe citizens, Boo and Neebs, navigating their industrialized...
That would be an enormous commercial risk. I mean, the Avatar state, the bending of all four elements, that is the spectacle people tune in for?
It is a massive risk. But the second theory is far more destructive to the... What if the events of Seven Haven, with the splitting of the light and dark avatars, the Rava and Vatu schism, what if that doesn't just create a temporary conflict? What if it completely destroys and resets the reincarnation cycle entirely?
Oh, wow. If the fundamental spirits of order and chaos are shattered or rewritten, the rigid cycle of earth, fire, air, water might be broken permanently. It would allow a new water avatar to emerge completely out of turn.
It would be the ultimate clean slate for the writers. They blow up the foundation of the house so they don't have to live by its architectural rules anymore.
That is heavy. And honestly, it highlights how fractured the legacy of this franchise feels behind the scenes right now. I have to bring up a side note from our research that perfectly encapsulates this identity crisis. The original head writer of the animated series recently gave an interview regarding the new live-action Netflix adaptation.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
And he said he liked it.
Which, in itself, is fine, but his specific phrasing caused a massive uproar.
He specifically stated that he felt the Netflix live-action team stuck the landing better than they did in the original cartoon.
To say that a live-action adaptation, which was heavily criticized for condensing the lore and removing much of the humor, handled the emotional climax better than the universally acclaimed animated finale, it is a staggering admission from the person who...
It is wild. It is like a Michelin-star chef coming out and praising a frozen microwave dinner over their own signature dish.
And look, we aren't taking a side on the Netflix debate here. We are just analyzing the implications of that statement. It shows that even the original creators and head writers are deeply questioning their own legacy, their own pacing, and their own rules.
It reveals a profound insecurity about the rigidity of their own canon.
Exactly. So I have to pose this to you. If they are breaking the Avatar cycle, introducing terms like spellsmith, featuring singing chancellors, and publicly questioning the endings of their own original masterpieces, are they dangerously close to losing the identity of what makes Avatar Avatar? This is the ultimate tightrope walk for any legacy franchise attempting to modernize. Intellectual property must evolve to survive the attention economy. If you only play the greatest hits, if you just keep making Aang fight the Fire Nation, the audience eventually gets bored.
Right. It gets stale.
But if you mutate the core mechanics too much, if you break the reincarnation cycle, abandon the Eastern philosophical roots for Western bureaucratic chancellors, or shift the tone into a musical comedy, you alienate the foundational audience who built your empire.
You essentially carve out the soul to save the body.
Yeah. The identity of Avatar relies on balance. As long as they maintain the emotional core, which is the journey of young, flawed people carrying the impossible geopolitical weight of the world on their shoulders, they can stretch the lore. They can have spellsmith. But the moment the lore overshadows that emotional truth, the magic trick fails.
The emotional truth is the anchor. Okay, let's pull all these threads together. We are looking at a franchise that is violently exploding back to life after years of absolute silence. We have the Aang movie acting as this massive, gorgeous, hand-drawn anchor, ironically pulled forward by a catastrophic leak to save the day.
And setting up that crazy weekend.
Right, we have a masterclass SDCC marketing blitz designed to trap us all in a 72-hour algorithmic synergy ecosystem. We have the lore-shattering, structurally destructive introduction of twin avatars in Seven Haven. And we have a strange, comedic, rule-breaking pivot with Red Thunder.
It is a remarkable case study in watching a beloved intellectual property to expand its bounds. They are trying to build a modern cinematic universe without completely shattering the fragile, intricate magic of the original world building.
It requires immense confidence, or immense desperation, and we are going to find out which it is very soon. And I want to leave you, listening right now, with one final provocative thought, something to mull over that hasn't been explicitly debated yet, but that has been bouncing around in my head since reading the mechanics of these casting calls.
Let's hear it.
Think deeply about Red Thunder. It explicitly requires an actor who can sing. The main character has skate rocker in it. It is a low-stakes, 22-minute comedy. Could Avatar Studios be quietly developing a full-blown animated musical, or even a band-centric show?
Oh, wow.
In a universe weighed down by the heavy apocalyptic geopolitical lore of the Avatar cycle, could the ultimate brilliant way to escape that pressure be to simply drop the mic, forget the bending elements for a minute, and start a punk band in the Water Tribe? Keep a very close eye on Hall H, because the magician's cards are still in the air, and we are just waiting to see what gets pulled out next.